We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. All right, BraveCo men, this week I'm with another great friend of mine, Mr. David Noroña. David, thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here, man.
So some people might recognize you. Some guys might be looking at this and being like, gosh, is that the dude from Jack Ryan?
Is that the dude whose six-pack I saw on Jack Ryan?
Yeah, probably is. Did I see him on Broadway at one point naked?
They would have seen more than a six-pack if you saw me on Broadway.
David, you're just a phenomenal man. You have a crazy story, and we're going to dive into it in a little bit, but you've acted for a very long time, and you're an actor on shows like Jack Ryan and...
Jack Ryan, man, and a lot of the cop things, so like CSI and FBI's and all the initials. The only one that I haven't been on that your dad would be disappointed to know is NCIS, because he's a super fan of that show.
Yeah.
And playfully, every time he goes to introduce me, he always says that I've been on that show, but I've actually never been on that show.
My dad.
For your dad, I would like to book NCIS.
Gosh, I hope you do at some point just for that. I remember, so my wife and I were sitting down, we were watching a show. I think that it might have been, it was the one where the president was...
Designated Survivor.
Yeah, so Designated Survivor.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah. In walks David Noroña. And my wife and I are like, wait a minute. That's him.
Yeah.
It was a really fun moment for us. Just super cool. But man, you did that for a long time. We're going to dive into that. You still do that. But you also helped to found Bethel Conservatory of the Arts, which is a school for artists, right? In teaching people how to act and
screenwriting, filmmaking, music theater, dance. Yeah.
Bro, it's so cool.
It is.
Yeah. And you just, man, you're just such a cool guy. So you also produce the BraveCo podcast as well.
I do. I've sat on the other side of this camera. It's a pleasure to be on.
Man. So it's so fun to have you here. And
thanks, brother. Yeah,
I want to just dive in a little bit. Like, how did you start out in the acting world? Because I mean, it's not like, well, I do have this funny story. Like my son, when my son was, my oldest son, which when he was young, he's like 9 years old, and he comes up to me one day and he says, "Dad, I need an agent."
Wow.
And so this was in the middle of my divorce, and I was really wore out, and I remember I was just like in survival mode.
Totally.
But I can remember I'm like, pulling clothes out of the dryer, and he goes, "Dad, I need an agent." And I'm just like,
not this week.
I said, "Oh, you need what? You need a what?" Trying to get ready for school. He says, "I need an agent." I said, "What do you need an agent for?" And he said, "I want to be an actor."
Because you were probably hoping baseball, football, sports agent, right?
And when your kids are young, you don't want to be like,
you don't want it to be a dream crusher. Yeah.
I'm not going to get you an agent.
Yeah.
So I think I was like, well, let's just talk about this later. But he's so adamant about he's going to be an actor, right? He's
just tell him, let's start with a church skit on Sunday and we'll work our way to Hollywood.
Bro, he couldn't sit still long enough.
I actually worked with one of your boys on Bethel Music Kid video. We were at Rare Air at a trampoline park here in Northern California, and he was one of the kids climbing the wall. I think Josie, I think, was singing that track.
Yeah.
One of the early...
Probably Evan or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, it's so cool. Yeah. So how did you get into acting, and what was life like for you in those early years?
Yeah, brother. I mean, I'm the kid of Cuban immigrants. So my folks came over in that first wave when Castro took over. My grandfather's a gnarly story.
Do you know what year that was?
Yeah. So it would have been in 59, 60 was when a lot of Cubans came over. That was like the first wave. There was another one in the 80s. So part of my family had to get out because my grandfather was actually a superintendent of the electrical plants in Cuba. He actually had meetings with Castro and everything. This was before he was communist. And so my grandfather, this is my mom's dad, actually had to escape because two of his employees were accused of bombing Castro's forces. and they came after my grandfather. My grandfather would not turn over his two guys. And so my grandfather actually had to escape through the sewers and the Panamanian embassy to get out of Cuba without telling his wife. My grandmother only found out that my grandfather was hiding in the Panamanian embassy when the Communist Party came knocking on her door, hunting my grandfather.
So he didn't even tell her like, hey, meet me at the embassy?
He didn't have time, bro. Like, imagine no pagers, no cell phones, right? Like, I mean, we're talking like late 50s, early 60s, right? And so he literally just had to run for his, he was in the trunk of a car, the sewer system, and then like hops the walls into the Panamanian embassy in Cuba to get out.
No way.
Yeah, my grandfather's a whole podcast. Like my grandfather, I joke, my grandfather was like a blend of Archie Bunker and this character from theater called Willie Loman. My grandfather is notorious. My mom and I were just laughing about it. We were drinking a scotch the other night, just laughing about my grandfather because my grandfather had supposedly deals with the Nazis, the Italian mob, maybe the CIA.
Your grandfather.
My grandfather, bro. Like, and we
What
can't.
a savage.
Yeah, he's just a total savage. Now, he passed away a long time ago. But for the life of us, after 50 years of being on the planet, my mother and I cannot figure out which part of his life was true or which part of it is totally made up.
Which is kind of cool because he's just legendary. Right?
He's a total legend. He's a total legend. So I'm the stock of that. That's the quick thumbnail there. So my family's Cuban, man. I grew up in Miami. No culture like to speak of. I joke that like the extent of culture, artistic culture in my home was like Cuban coffee, salsa music, hanging out with family. Me being an actor, the first thing that my grandfather got concerned about was that I was going to be gay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He was totally worried about it. In his later years.
Even back then.
Oh yeah, totally.
Wow.
So, but in later years, he was super proud and he would always show me off. If I'd show up at his house, he'd knock on neighbors' doors and say, this is my grandson who's on TV. Yeah. He at the end, he was super, super proud. And so, yeah, brother, I mean, my hop into the arts was actually through an English teacher, and I'm still connected to her today. She changed the course of my life.
Really? What happened?
She needed a kid to be in this musical called The Fantastics. And like the extent of my actor training was like practicing a speech in the mirror. That was it. There was no formal training. But here's where it gets trippy. I've shared this story in other environments, but like, I had to audition for it. Now, like a good Cuban kid who was, I was like bound for medical school. Like that's where I was going to go, right?
Oh, really?
Kid of immigrants. Yeah. I had gone into Brown University of Miami to go to medical school. And then my English teacher says, you've got to audition for this musical. So I prepare the monologue. Now I can't remember most of it, but the only thing I can remember is that this boy's talking about this girl he has a crush on the other side of this fence. And the monologue starts, there's this girl. Now I had practiced in the mirror, like a girl, like at a sleepover with, singing in the mirror. Like that was the extent of me preparing for this monologue. And then the next thing I know, I'm in front of my peers and my English teacher. And I start the monologue. And about halfway through, I used to say at the time, something overtook me and I leapt off the stage. I took a knee in front of my English teacher and I delivered the rest of the monologue. So you can imagine, man, like, in high school, we're all walking around half awkward. Her jaw drops and she's like, we were both like, what happened? Okay. It was only, and I went running down the hall. It was like something at a High School Musical or Fame or something. I went running down the hall going, yeah, I got it.
Because you wanted the part.
I wanted the part. I was super scared, but I wanted the part. What I only realized many, many decades later, probably at BSSM here, was that it wasn't something that had overtaken me. It was actually Holy Spirit. It was someone. Wow. I only realized it was like it was like Old Testament, like the power of God overtakes you for such a time as this. Because what came out of me, I don't know. I don't have any other explanation for it.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Like, where do you go from there? So like you're in, yeah, like you do this school play. Did you find out during the school, like, this is what I want to do? At what point were you like, man, I need an agent?
Bro, the hand of God was all over it. So, okay, there was that moment where I do the monologue and I leap off the stage. Then the next moment is, if you can imagine, that my high school English teacher just happens, wink, wink, to know the associate head of drama at one of the top drama schools in the world. This guy was actually her former student. And she says to me, hey, I think you've got something, as in like talent or whatever. And I know this guy and I want you to meet him. And so I meet him. He just comes by to like hang out with his high school teacher and, she's talking me up.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, I want you to audition. Now, I was a poor kid from the barrio, bro. So like I couldn't afford to travel to New York, LA, Pittsburgh, or whatever. So check this out. Carnegie Mellon, which is where I went to school, would hold auditions in only 3 major cities. And I think they also would do like a satellite city like New Orleans. So check this out. Of all the years that it's my year to audition, and we don't have the money to fly me, there's a hurricane in New Orleans. They cancel New Orleans. They move it to Coral Gables, which is a small posh town in Miami, which is literally 10 minutes from my high school.
No way.
So I drive to the audition, and get this. This is where the Lord just kind of cleared the way, because I know I wouldn't have gotten in otherwise. Instead of auditioning in a town, opposite or against whatever, 300, 500, 800 kids, I audition against 7.
No way.
That's it. I'm the only one out of the 7 who got in. And I'm humble enough to know that there's no way on earth I would have stood out opposite 500 kids who had been tap dancing since 5. I'd done like 2 plays, bro. and a mirror. So a mirror monologue. So I get into this school, and again, it just changes the course of my life. Somehow I end up at one of the best drama schools in the world.
Dude, that's wild.
Crazy.
Oh, were you saved? Like, what was your family like? Were you saved? Did you know
Catholic?
God? Catholic.
I was Catholic. So like I knew of Jesus. I used to joke that I used to go to mass. My grandmother would drag me to mass sometimes, and this was pre-Vatican II, so it was full Latin.
Yeah.
So not only was it boring, I couldn't even understand.
Yeah. For real.
So I remember the church had like these, candelabras or whatever hanging around. And I would get so bored as a little boy that I'd start like playing like finger guns. And my Cuban grandmother would slap me and say, Niño, there's no guns in church. No guns in church. So that was the extent of my faith. And the thing about it, bro, is when you go to acting school, you get I was 17 years old when I went.
Yeah.
And I left home.
Gosh, dude, that's so young.
I was a baby. It was the first plane I ever got on. Literally, because we were so poor. Like I never flew on a plane.
It's like a terrifying experience. Not necessarily even flying, but just like you are in such an uncomfortable place away from everybody, and now you have to do this thing that like you didn't have anybody before you. Like your dad wasn't an actor. Your mom's not. Like you're doing this thing that you've never done before. Like how crazy was that?
No, the only and there's a Spanish word which means a kind of bull crap artist.
Yeah.
My grandfather, there's this word in Spanish which is cuentista. It's actually what I call my production company. It has a double meaning. It means storyteller and a bull crap artist.
No way.
It does. So if I have any genes for being a performer, double agent, it would be my grandfather, Fidel. Anyway, so I get on this plane, man. I go to this school. I'm 17 years old, and I'll never forget the first acting class that I had. So I'd never really taken a formal acting class. And actors do these really weird things to figure out how to act. So sometimes we'll do these exercises where we'll just walk around the room in these neutral positions, almost like these kind of zombies. And I remember I'd never done anything like this in my life. And I'm 17 years old, right? And I'm a boy.
Yeah.
So like we're walking around, and I really just wanted to piss my pants. I thought, what did I just sign up for? This is the most ridiculous. And no one else wanted to laugh. Everybody else was taking it so seriously. And I just kept thinking, what am I doing? The other side of it, though, is when you're training to be an actor, you get super vulnerable.
Right.
Like crazy vulnerable. There was this exercise where you had to tap into your emotions by like recalling an experience.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm 17 years old, and I go to visit my high school girlfriend that I was still trying to like stay connected to. Like I really, really loved her. Her name was Vanessa. And so I go like Hail Mary pass to go see her at Vassar, this very posh thing on the East Coast with a group of guys in a car. All right. So I go. She completely shuts me down. She's like,
does she know that you're in acting school?
Oh, yeah.
And that wasn't even enough for her.
Yeah, man. She was being polite. I thought I'm going to make this happen. Yeah, she's going to take me back. I drive back in a car with 3 guys, fully rejected by this girl. And then on Monday morning, it gets worse. At like midnight Sunday, I arrive. On Monday morning, I have to walk into acting class and do this exercise. What do I decide to do?
Bro, you're fresh.
Got it. This is as raw as sushi. It was like hard sushi. So here's what I decided, my 17-year-old wisdom. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to recall what's just happened to me. So I walk into acting class with a cigarette box of pictures of my now ex-girlfriend. And I decide that I'm going to look at these pictures in front of my peers as a part of this acting exercise. So I start looking at these pictures, and about 60 seconds in, I start to ugly cry. I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. I had snot, tears. Everybody got so uncomfortable in the class that finally my acting instructor says, David, listen, why don't you step outside? So I said, so I go outside into the hallway by the bathrooms and proceed to ugly cry for another 90 minutes.
Wait, what?
Class ends. People are still coming out, and they're half like looking at me like,
yeah, they are.
Yeah, like they're just feeling for me, embarrassed. And all my acting teacher says, I'll never forget this. She's an amazing woman. We've stayed in touch. But she didn't really have the tools, for this moment.
Yeah.
She says to me, listen, sweetie, maybe next time don't pick something so fresh. And I said, it's probably a good idea. Yeah. So I had no tools to handle that amount of vulnerability. And then to boot, I wasn't walking with the Lord.
Right.
So you can just imagine the messes that I made over 4 years.
Bro, I mean, how many times did you look around and go like, what the heck did I sign myself up for? Like, what am I doing? Because it didn't seem like you started out with this childhood dream to be an actor. It seems like you had this moment, this catalytic moment in school where you found out like, oh, this is really cool. And then you just kept following. Like, what was that like?
I think for most of it, it's a really complicated, layered question, which could be, a 6-parter. I think the short response is like, I didn't know who I was. I wanted validation and significance. And there's no heroin to a 16-year-old that's more intoxicating than the affirmation of your peers and popularity, girls responding to you. And that, they say heroin is one of the most addictive things. Yeah. I actually think significance is maybe a way more one.
Yeah.
Because it's accepted. It's hidden in this weird leaven-like way where you don't even know that that's what's driving you. And I think I chased that until I showed up at the doors of BSSM, bro. I mean, if I'm honest. I mean, I think back, and my wife always told me, you're too smart to be an actor. You could have been a lawyer, a doctor. And, I've since then have found out I'm actually kind of weird for an actor. Like, I geek out on certain things that are way more like, so I'm a little bit weird when it comes to actors. And I'm not saying actors aren't brilliant. I mean, there's such brilliant actors, Meryl Streep, Anthony Hopkins. There's people that are crazy geniuses in their own way. I just didn't fit the traditional mold, man. And I didn't really discover that till I came to school of ministry here. If I'm being fully honest, man, I mean, I was beyond middle age. I think I was 39 turning 40. My midlife crisis was coming to a school of supernatural ministry.
No way.
It wasn't a ponytail or a Corvette.
Bro, that's awesome. Yeah. That's a good midlife crisis to have.
It's not a bad one. It's a good place to show up. But suffice it to say that it was like not having the Lord in my life. There was just a lot of other things that became my idols, my gurus, my theology, if you will, bro. Like, what my value system was based on the show or the gig that I just done, how much money I had just made, how big was the contract, how important was my agent or manager,
And that I think you're right. Like, it's so easy to see nowadays, especially because we have real measuring tools. I mean, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, and we have, anybody at any point can literally become or work to become famous on, whereas before, like, you had to go to an acting school, you had to find a way to get somebody willing to film you. And today it's really easy to, it's so easy to see like, man, if you're not careful, you will spend all of your time trying to get affirmation, trying to gain significance through somebody else's approval of you. And that's such a lonely, low place to be because you never really feel it.
Not only is it lonely, like it's super deceptive because I've made my biggest mistakes in life in my marriage when shows got canceled.
Wow.
Because when you measure yourself by the contract, by the money that's being deposited, I mean, here's the thing, man. Like, I mean, if you're poor and you have no sense of identity, you get money like that. And I mean, most guys get tripped up with fame, females, and fortune.
100%.
Right? Yep. So, and then when you're in an industry with a lot of attractive people and money's, I mean, you have monopoly money hitting your account. I mean, I jokingly say, but it's not a joke, that when I was on a show, which wasn't all the time, to be very clear, but when I was on series regular, which is, those characters that are on every week,
yep.
I was making more money in 2 weeks than I did an entire year working here at Bethel.
Golly.
But let me be very, very direct about this. Like, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't go back.
But dude, you can see how easy it is to chase that,
100%.
right? And to go, man, I've made it. I've got somewhere because I have this thing, I got money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty enticing.
But imagine your entire identity. Like there was one moment, maybe my toughest one. It was a little bit of a breaking point for me where I was on a show. I went to Trader Joe's because, I'm an actor. So I'm only working a couple days a week, right? But they're paying me like I'm, something special. And so I'm on my day off or something like this, I go to Trader Joe's, and I'll never forget this, in the parking lot of Trader Joe's in North Hollywood, in SoCal, LA, I get a call from the producer, and this is what he says to me. I'm in shorts and like a t-shirt and my flip-flops, right? And he says to me, "Hey, listen, man, if you want to say goodbye to the cast, we just got canceled, by the way. You might want to get down here in the next 45 minutes.
No way.
And I hop in my car and I go and I gather my things, and we're saying goodbye. And, of course it didn't end there because we're a bunch of depressed actors. So, ended up going to a bar for the next, 12 hours with
making a bunch of mistakes.
Oh my gosh. Train wrecks.
Let's back up just a tiny bit.
Sure, man.
When was the first time that you got something that beyond like, okay, I got to this school, you spend 4 years in school learning to become an actor. Like, what was the first big gig that you got?
First big gig, and here's what's crazy, is I and I've shared the story in other environments, but it's a good topic because it covers a lot of things. So I actually, when I graduated school, I was 21 years old. I actually went to New York, and within about 2 months, I booked my first Broadway show, which is not. I'm not saying this to puff myself up. I'm just saying this is not what happens normally. Okay.
Yeah.
And now it's as an understudy, which means I'm basically like the backup for a couple of young actors. The deal was, and we were off Broadway at the time, but then when the show is successful, it's called transferring or moving the show from off Broadway to Broadway. So I had been off Broadway covering the show, and I had never gone on because the two young guys that I covered never got sick.
So do you learn every part?
I have to learn so you have to learn multiple roles.
Okay.
It's like a weird, crazy job, right?
Dude, that seems like an insane job.
Yeah. Like imagine imagine you're, and I'm not a huge sports guy, bro, so I'm going to expose myself here for a sec on your masculine podcast, but I'm more of an artsy fartsy guy. But imagine that you're a backup for not just the pitcher, but the catcher and the first baseman.
Yeah. It's
weird.
Completely different roles. Yeah. It's crazy.
So you learn all these roles or whatever. Okay, so now one of the guys that I was covering was a newly diagnosed, and just out of respect for him, I won't say his name, but he was a newly diagnosed epileptic. And they hadn't quite gotten his medication right. So we find this out off Broadway. They move the show on Broadway. And then literally during one of the performances, it's my job to watch the show a couple times a week just to stay fresh, right? And I'm watching the show. And at the end of Act 1, this particular actor that I was covering, he has this major monologue where he stands up and he tells one of the other guys off. Halfway through his monologue, he starts acting really weird, and he goes up on his lines, and then he walks off stage. And then all of a sudden we hear these strange noises off stage. Turns out that he was having a grand mal major seizure off stage. I'm up in the loge, those box seats. And one of the other understudies, he turns to me and says, "You're going on." So they stopped the show in a Broadway theater with several thousand people, the Walter Kerr Theater. I run down to the landing at the bottom of the steps, and the actor that I'm covering is actually shaking on the ground. It's an old theater joke, but they say to the audience, is there a doctor in the house, which is an old theater joke. And 3 doctors come up, and literally within about 15 minutes, I'm in wardrobe that I've never worn, on a stage that I've never rehearsed in.
No way.
And like a DVD player, they basically walk out, we hit play, and I pick up where he left off.
Bro, were you terrified?
Oh, I was literally having like, probably not a Christian thing to say, but I'm having an out of body experience.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching myself from all angles. But here's where it gets better, man. So that's the end of Act 1. What I didn't say about the play is that it deals with a group of gay men over 3 summer holidays.
No way.
And at the top of Act 2, which is my next entrance, I am fully butt-ass naked,
no
standing
way.
in front of 1,500 people doing this whole monologue. As if that is not bad enough, I then hop off this raft that, they've made, it's supposed to be this raft or whatever. And I run down because now I'm supposed to come back on stage as if I've hopped in the lake fully drenched. So I'm nude, take a shower. I grab my wardrobe because my next entrance is with me holding my clothes, and 10 feet away from the audience, I just walk out like I'm talking normal and I get dressed in front of 1,500 people.
No, you do not.
That's how I made my Broadway debut at 21.
How? Bro, how did you do that?
And let me also add, it was very cold. It was very cold. So how did you do it? I don't know, man. Actors are trained in a weird, ironic way. I know I've just talked about a gay play, and making your Broadway debut naked, but actors are kind of trained like Navy SEALs. Like you just kind of do what you're told.
Yeah.
And I just practiced and you just do it. You just do it.
When I think about that moment, there's so much terror involved in that. Like,
for sure.
Had you thought through, like, realistically, I'm going to have to stand up in front of people naked. Like, had you ever done that before?
No. Gosh, no.
Is that something you guys practice in art school?
No.
Like, you're going to stand here and you're going to recite these lines, God help me. And somebody turned down the air conditioning.
There was never any formal practice, but because most of us were not walking with Jesus and there was a lot of alcohol involved over my 4 years of college, there was probably some informal practice. No, man, and you have weird conversations. Like I remember having a conversation, like these are things that you just don't anticipate ever having. So Joe Mantello, who was the director of Wicked and a bunch of other things, he's famous for this play, this other play called Angels in America. I remember once, this was such an awkward conversation, but I was just remembering it now. We were rehearsing in the off-Broadway thing, and he kind of came in to check on the show, and he says, "Hey, David, can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And again, I won't say the actor's name. He says, "Listen, man, I just kind of want to talk to you privately about something." I said, "Okay." He said, "Listen, I just want to prepare you. Like the actor that you're covering, he's pretty well hung." This is what he says.
Bro.
He says, "And it's okay, man. Like, don't worry about kind of living up." And I'm navigating so many things. Number one, I'm talking to a Tony Award winning, and everything in me wants to impress this guy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like anatomically, that's probably not going to happen. So,
and he's telling you that's not going to happen.
And he's saying it's okay. Like it's okay. Like don't worry about it. He's kind of,
oh my gosh,
well endowed. Don't worry about having to live up. So man, I was trained to like impress him by my acting, and here I'm having to navigate things that I don't have any control over. So it's humbling, bro.
Golly.
On every level.
Yeah, so humbling. Did that like launch you though? I mean, after you did that, like did that guy come back and get his role back, or did you get a spot?
He did, yeah. I mean, that's the thing about an understudy, man. So you do it a couple times and then, it's like you're subbing for Steph Curry, and then it's like number one is back on. Yeah, I mean, it opened up a lot of things, man. I mean, it led to some TV gigs, some film stuff. And then, pretty soon I moved to LA. I was only in New York for about 2 years because then I ended up in this TV musical with Angela Lansbury, who actually just passed away recently. And I definitely got hooked to the sunshine of SoCal.
Yeah.
The money. I made more money in like 3 weeks in LA than I did in 2 years of theater.
Yeah.
And I was like,
forget
Papa
theater.
Likes this.
Forget theater.
Exactly.
Dang. That's so wild, man. I mean, I have so many questions for real. It's just like sometimes I have to do some research on people that come in because I'm trying to find out what the real question. Like,
sure.
I am so genuinely interested in this world because we see actors all the time.
Yeah.
And everyone has their favorite actor, and you get to watch these movies. They entertain us, right? Like actors are entertainers, but like you get trained to go into another reality.
Yeah.
And to pull on real emotions, at least I'm guessing.
Oh, absolutely.
To pull on real emotions to play this part.
Yep.
Like, how much does that play into your marriage? Like, how do you navigate between like, I'm really showing up,
Yep.
really me, and or like I'm just coming home playing this. Like, was that hard to
Absolutely
pull those worlds apart? How do you do that?
And that's where some of my messes were. I mean, listen, I'm not being funny here. Like, when you're kissing somebody, you're kissing somebody.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and it happened in a play, and for the sake of this actress, I won't give too many details, but she played my girlfriend, I think, in this particular play. I'll keep it generic.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a moment where she approached me. I was already married, and she said, "I'd like you to be my last affair." And I was like, "Oh, wow." Now listen, let me be honest. Because she was playing my girlfriend.
Oh yeah.
And because, usually they're casting people that are considered attractive in some way, shape, or form. I had to already navigate some things internally for myself.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm kissing her on stage, and now she's basically like inviting me into something. Thank God on this particular occasion, and I would love to say that I always handled this right. In this particular occasion, I actually said no. I told my wife that I had said no. That even when you say no, it still is a crap storm in your home.
Yeah.
Because now there's like sincere fear and concern, like, well, but you guys are doing this on stage. And so now my wife has to like this whole other layer that she already, because she's watching her husband kiss somebody every day.
Yeah.
That's a thing. And then the actress that I said no to completely iced me out for the rest of the run.
No way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Because she felt rejected and so on and so forth. I've made my biggest messes in that space. It's one of the things that we try to train our actors to navigate well. A lot of our actors that leave our school at BCA, they decide that there's just certain things they're never going to do. I'll be honest with you, like now having 4 kids, now a daughter, 3 boys, there are definitely some lines that I would draw today of things that I'm just not interested in doing.
Yeah.
Life's complicated enough, brother.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to light anything on the inside of me on fire.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't want to hurt my girl.
Bro, it's so true. Like, I was talking to Fab about this a while ago, because it really is fascinating. I think about it sometimes, like if that's your profession, right? Like, chances are you're going to have a scene where you have to kiss somebody, where you have to have this intimate moment. Like, how do you do that and not get like
sucked in,
bro? Cause I'm a guy, right?
Of
like the thought of kissing another woman, so exciting.
I love how honest you are.
It's like the thought of robbing a bank.
Yeah, sure.
Bro, like the thought of robbing a bank would be like, put me in. I mean, if you don't have to hurt people and you don't go to jail, well, that's a pretty exciting
and listen,
thing.
And you get to tell your wife, hey, listen, it just paid for your Hawaii vacation.
Yeah.
And it's just my work, babe. It's just my work. It's just my job. Yeah, it's also your face in another woman's face.
So I've said to my wife the other day, like, because we were talking about this, and I said, I don't think I could have you do that. That would just
that's the double standard. Like I think about my girl doing it, and no.
Yeah,
I have killing fantasies when that.
But how do you? For reals, as an actor, how do you navigate that world, and how hard is it on your marriage to do stuff like that?
So there was another piece where by the time I did that one, I can't remember if I was saved by that point, but there was definitely some wisdom, if I can call it that, or some like realizations that I had, and this was one. I had started to see the following thing, and I don't know if other guys feel this, but I had started to see that like some attractions were just like temporary wildfires, where it's like you hook onto the one pretty girl that's just crossed your radar for this week, this month, whatever, this year. And here's what I'd started to notice. I started to notice that if I didn't feed it, and I definitely didn't act on it, it passed.
It's so true.
And then I would think, holy crap, if I had acted on this temporary wildfire, I would have blown up my life. And so part of what I had started to learn was just to go, all right, let me find somebody that I can kind of confess this to. And this was even pre-Jesus. Like, let me just go confess.
Wow.
Let me try to start getting it out, because I started realizing that if I could get it out, it might diffuse the bomb a little bit. And then I had started to realize of like, oh, that just passed. Like, I'm not even thinking about that anymore. Man, I'm so glad I didn't act on that. Now, in the moment when you do it, I've only realized this later on, you better have some accountability factors. There's definitely going to be some confession that's going to happen. I think it would be very unlikely for you to not at some point have that kiss or whatever scene you're doing, maybe start stepping into fantasy land, fantasy island.
Pull on you.
Right? So you better start getting it out.
Yeah.
You better start confessing it. Denzel Washington, who's I think a spirit-filled Catholic, I think is how he described himself. He's a total beast. Yeah. There's kind of it's maybe an off-color joke, but I think he really genuinely means it. When he steps into like a sexual scene or romantic scene with a woman, specifically I think in the context of like a bedroom scene, he'll say the following thing to them. Listen, if it happens, don't be offended. And if it doesn't, don't be offended.
Bro.
Like, how aware is he that he goes, all right, some of these mechanics might come into play.
Yeah.
It's just that.
My body might do something that it was designed to do.
But I'm going home to my wife, and I just want you to know, don't be offended.
Wow.
I think there's such honesty and wisdom in that, man.
So you said something a second ago that we don't talk about a lot.
Okay.
And I think that is really helpful for young men. I remember I was dating my first wife.
Yeah. And
was really serious about her. And I remember being in this conflict because I'm 17 years old. You know, my emotions are, right? Like my testosterone's through the roof, my emotions off the charts. And I remember having these feelings for this other girl. And my dad and I were working together at his auto parts store. Oh, wow. And I just told my dad, like, I don't know what to do because I'm dating my ex-wife, you know, I'm dating this girl, but I have some feelings for this other girl. And he said, oh, my dad's he's such a beast.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, just don't feed it.
Wow.
I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, son, he said this to me. He said, you know, when I roll over in bed in the morning and I see your wife, or I see your mom, I don't always feel these crazy emotions for her. I don't feel like, wow, I'm so enamored to be in bed with her. And he said, sometimes, you know, sometimes I get that, but most of the time I just go throughout my day. And he said, you're going to have these pulls throughout life towards other things, other people's, money, whatever. He said, whatever you don't feed will eventually go away.
He's
like, I'm 17, right? Wow. That was like one of the greatest gifts because, and we're not going to go down this road so far, but so many men fear their sexuality.
Yep.
They fear their sexuality because it's this thing that feels like it leads them. It's so out of control. And we get afraid as men when we start to feel a pull towards, honestly, this thing that we've been designed for. Like, I'm not the one that wired me. I'm not the one that
God's like, hey man, what's happening inside you right now?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's true. And I always just want to hide.
Right.
But if we can, honestly, if you can manage that thing inside of you and begin to go, hey, listen, I am not my desires. I am not these things, my pull. I am the virtues and values that I embrace. And so being an actor, like, you would really have to be, like, if you weren't on it, because that's the world that you're in a fantasy world. You're creating fantasy realities for people, not necessarily sexual fantasies, but you're creating this fantasy. You would have to somehow have a way to come back to be grounded back into real world.
If I ever found myself in that position again, I mean, I found myself in so many awkward places. I've had girls come into my trailer. This is where we have our, where we hang out between takes or scenes or whatever. I've had girls come into the trailer and then say, hey, can I use the bathroom? And then all of a sudden they're like using the bathroom and this just, it's like, it starts spinning you out. Or I've been at parties or rap parties and my wife is out of town and because she was an artist, and toured and stuff like this. And I found myself in positions, so many positions that I think your dad's wisdom is so spot on. Like, I don't think we should be surprised that we find ourselves attracted to attractive people or that these things come up. Like, I've been thinking so much about because you're actually referencing, I know this because I produced the podcast where that phrase, being afraid of, and that thing went so deep for me, man, because all of a sudden you gave language to something that I think I had felt, honestly, till I heard you say it. The more I think about it, and I could be off on this because I know different dudes are wired different ways.
No,
so I'm
you're
just
good.
speaking for myself.
Yeah,
like, I think that if I have a high sex drive or whatever language we want to use for this thing that comes up for me, like more and more what I'm realizing is that I think what God is inviting me into is a worthwhile, I really want to say that up front, a worthwhile sacrifice unto my wife of like, hey, there's all this other fire, right? It could like blow up or whatever, but like, I'm going to channel all this fire and I'm going to be like a laser on you. Like I'm going to bring all of this stuff to you, unto you. And your dad's absolutely right. If I ignore all those other distractions, I have found over time, whether it's pornography or attraction to other women or whatever, if you don't feed that thing, man, like it gets quieter. And then whatever is left feels like this pure desire for your wife or that you bring it to her, you choose. Like your dad is taught, Danny is taught, like, I choose you. I choose to bring these desires to you.
It's crazy because like when you channel your will in your emotion, when you do that, like it really can be like this crazy force, this crazy drive to like, and it's so easy to pull all that drive away by dabbling over here for a little bit, right? I had this conversation. I was leading a bunch of guys probably a week and a half ago, just discipling them, these 12 really awesome guys. And I was talking about this conversation of managing your sex drive. And one guy at the end, he said, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." So all the guys are listening. He said, when you see a woman who's not dressed in almost anything, what do you feel? I was like, "Bro, I feel excited." What do you think I feel? Like, it's exciting. Then I go, "That's not mine." Like instantly, right? And I got back, I'm telling these guys, like, we just don't talk about it enough. That's why we're stopping right here for a second and going like, man, we don't have this conversation to men enough to go like, "Hey, listen, you weren't the one that wired you. This is how you're designed." But also we are given so much permission to manage this thing, which is what makes you an awesome guy, is when you go like, you're not awesome if there's no drive and you just go like, "Well, I didn't do anything." It's like, bro, you didn't do anything because there's no drive.
Yep.
But the fact that you actually went like, "No, I felt really excited." And at the same time I went, "Not mine, dude.
And walk away.
This is it. I'm focused on this." And man, being an actor, you'd have to do that a lot.
You would have to. Yeah. And I think in the future, if I ever a lot of the roles that I play as of late, because I'm 50 now, they're not necessarily asking me to do that.
Bro, you look good though. Come on.
Man.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, shucks. But, yeah, funny story on Jack Ryan. There was this moment where you get these call sheets, and it's like, oh, right, that big scene. And I had auditioned with this scene, so I knew it. And it's this beach scene. So when I did the beach scene audition, they described me as like dressed in like linen, because I was playing a Hispanic dude. And so I was wearing like this linen shirt, linen pants. I was playing catch with my son. My wife was up in the window and all this kind of stuff. So I hadn't really looked at the scene because they had been throwing me. I was in six or seven episodes. And so, and you shoot out of order. So I had just forgotten about the beach scene. So all of a sudden I look at the schedule and I was like, "Oh gosh, that's right. We're going up to Cartagenes and we're going to do the beach scene." I was like, "Oh yeah, I already got that one memorized." And I'm like, "Ooh, let me take another look. Let me make sure they haven't rewritten." So I read the rewrite, and all of a sudden you see all these asterisk marks, and where there's asterisk marks, it means they revised, and it's like bullet holes. I'm like, "Oh man, they rewrote the entire scene. Oh crap." And I read it, and this is the first line of description is, my character's name was Jose Marzan.
That's amazing.
It reads like this: Jose Marzan emerges from the ocean, shirtless, water dripping down his chest. Listen, at that point, I wasn't thinking about memorizing my lines. I put the thing down. I went to the gym. And literally the day that we shot it, I joked that I went manorexic.
Bro, you bet you did.
Oh, bro, I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't drink fluids. I was like a wrestler just trying to shred. All I did, like, there's this thing called the actor prepares. I was not thinking about my emotional reality. All I kept doing was I was doing dips, push-ups. When I came out of the dressing room, I had to come out shirtless because, of course, when we direct it, the director just decides as I'm rehearsing that I'm never going to put a shirt on. So now for the entire scene, I'm shirtless. Yeah. She I could hear them talking at video.
She's like, "He looks good."
I literally at one point, this was a good guy ego moment. She literally said to the female producers, I did pretty good, didn't I? And I was like, but when I came out, I've been working out the entire morning, and Michael, who was the actor on another big show, I won't drop the expletives, but I came out shirtless, and he's like, you're shredded. And I was like, I'm not shredded that way anymore. But yeah, I worked on that for about 4 weeks. But we were going somewhere else.
Bro, I don't know, but I love it. So wait, let's go back to that scene. Do you have to stay like in shape a lot for these roles?
I choose to, first of all, I want to be attractive to my wife these days. Like, I just still want her to find me hot at 50, bro.
Yeah, it's
and
real.
after a pizza or something, you look profile in the mirror and you're like, dang, that's rough. That profile sucks. So I want to stay in shape. The other reality, and I mean this one, like, we had my daughter pretty late in life. I joke, my wife hates this joke, but I joke that we're Abraham and Sarah. So like,
bro, I have the same joke going.
Okay.
I have a 1 and a 3-year-old.
So you know 43. What I'm talking about? Yeah, bro. Yeah. So I had my last 43.
Dude, I feel so much closer to you right now.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I don't want to have a walker or a wheelchair when I walk my daughter down the aisle. And I could be in my flipping 70s, right?
I was just telling my daughter, she was 3. I was holding her, and I was telling her, baby, when you're 40, dad's going to be real old. And she's trying to process it. And I realized, like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be talking like this with her.
It's kind of heavy.
Bro, I was feeling so sad because I was thinking when she's my age, I'm going to be 80 years old.
That's right.
But it makes me up my game.
Oh, heck yeah.
It makes me think like,
I watch what I eat.
Big time.
Yeah. This sounds super bougie, but like I'm up at 5. I'm on that Peloton.
Yeah.
I watch what I eat. And so, yeah, I mean, I do it for acting. I don't do it so much for acting these days. I mean, I want to stay decent.
But Jose can't come out of the water with a 6-pack, bro, if you're all fat. That's a different show, bro.
Shirtless, water dripping, David. That's the part that killed me. So yeah, man, I try to watch that stuff, but mainly these days it's for my 2 most important girls.
Can we talk a little bit about like some big disappointments in your career? Because I know just acting is so many highs. Like if you get a good role, dude, like you said, you make more money in 2 weeks than you make in 2 years as a pastor. And that's real. Like that's not that hard to do, but that's real. But like what's the lowest low you've had in the acting world?
So this story comes up a fair amount because it's actually the one that leads me to the Lord. So I actually I got offered the musical Jersey Boys, which was about Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. So any baby boomer would know who I'm talking about. They were a doo-wop band, and Frankie Valli had a career that spanned the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. Wow. He still tours, and he's in the 70s. And so Frankie, I played him in this musical, and I had to sing like 26 songs because I was like, he's the lead singer, right? I actually auditioned singing the song that my dad heard. It's called Sherry, and it's about this girl named Sherry. My dad, when he got off the plane from Cuba, that was the top 10 song when he was 5 years old. And now I got to play the dude who sang this. So my dad actually got to see me play Frankie Valli, and it was this big deal. The thing about it is I hadn't been actually keeping my music theater chops up, and then I booked this gig where I've got to sing like 26 songs per show. Frankie rarely leaves the stage, the character I was playing. And then on top of that, when you do any live show, you actually do 8 performances a week. So
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So what a lot of people don't know is when you're doing a live show, you have 1 show on Friday, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. You get Monday off, but you're back on Tuesday.
Did you say this was Broadway?
So this was off Broadway. We were in San Diego actually at the.
But those kind of shows.
Yeah, but any kind of show goes 8 shows a week. That's just the economics of it. Yeah, because you know, unlike a TV show, you got to pack them in, and you've only got 8 shows to do that, man. Right? So all the financials. So I do this show, and I end up starting to cause vocal damage on my cords. I didn't know it at the time. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to an ear, nose, throat, an ENT, and he's basically putting a scope, a camera through my nostril and down into my throat to look at my cords. Every 2 weeks I'm doing this. And,
because you're having trouble.
Yeah. Almost like a pro athlete, man, like where they're doing MRIs and they're doing stuff just to make sure like that your body's okay. I was starting to feel a little bit of strain, but like that's not uncommon when you're singing a beast of a show like that. Right. Then the doctor says, hey, why don't we start putting you on prednisone, which is a steroid? So I did like 3 or 4 rounds of prednisone. Now, if you know anything about prednisone, it's a steroid, jacks up your anger. It can make you depressed. It can make you aggressive. And now I'm isolated from everybody because now I'm on vocal rest. So now I don't talk outside the show.
Oh my gosh.
So the only words I'm speaking over 3 months are the lines and the lyrics of the show.
That's like a prison, dude.
My son had just been born, Zion. He's 6 months old. I'm on vocal rest, so now I can't talk to my firstborn child. My wife gets so fed up with me that she says, and I mean, by the way, let me be very clear. She had been very supportive. Like, I mean, she's sitting there reading my lips. And then finally she said, babe, the thing about it is it's actually painful for me to see you in this state.
Oh yeah.
And you can't talk to Zai. So I think we're going to go home. Okay. And I just said, yeah, babe. Okay, whatever. So now I'm by myself. I start getting addicted to pornography because I'm friggin' feeling depressed and lonely. I mean, not justifying it, but those were the facts.
Yeah.
I'm now starting to take sleeping pills and prednisone.
Oh my God.
And so suffice it to say, man, that around that time, the show it's selling so well. I think I'm going to go home by Thanksgiving. Like I'm actually, I don't know that I was praying, but if I had been praying, I would have been praying. Like, please get me home because I'm so depressed right now. And then we get the good news. I'm doing air quotes right now that the show's going to be extended for another 6 weeks. It was like you thought you were going to get out of prison.
And you're already trashed.
Yeah. And I'm already trashed. Anyways, they extend the show. They offer me Broadway. They offer me like a ton of money. They offer me what I would have made on a TV pilot just to keep me on hold.
Wow.
I'm now home. I now kind of know, but I'm keeping it a secret from everybody that I think I have vocal damage. Because your vocal cords it's kind of like a muscle, but it's also tissue, and you can create these things that are called nodes that are like calluses. The problem is when you get those, it creates a separation between your cords and you can't produce the sound in the same way. So long story short, they offer me Broadway. I'm in negotiations, but they are forcing me to do all 8 shows. And I'm trying to negotiate to have the matinees off so that I can actually have rest.
Right.
The director shuts it down because he says, if the audience finds out that David's not performing the lead, they won't buy tickets to the matinees. So now I wake up in a panic attack, like a full blown panic attack at like 3:00 in the morning. We're actually now tapping into our home equity because I've been doing live theater, but I own an LA home.
Right.
So I'm going into the red, being successful. I'm actually losing money every month.
Holy smokes.
And so I wake up in a panic attack. I wake up my wife and she says, babe, are you okay? And I said, I can't do it. She says, what do you mean? I said, I can't do the show. And with compassion, but also honest, she says, babe, this is your dream role. What do you mean you're not going to do it? And I said, I'm already in a full-blown panic and anxiety attack, and we don't even go to Broadway till October, and it's January. Like, I'm not going to make it. I'm so stressed out. I tell my agent, I tell my manager, and literally all hell breaks loose. I have one of the Four Seasons calling me, the director calling me. My manager and agent are freaking out on me because I'm passing on the best gig that I've ever had in my entire career. It was that started a very long and winding road down into a black hole of depression. But it was at that bottom that I finally encountered the Lord.
Wow.
That's what it took.
Bro, so how did you're literally passing on the best role that you've ever had.
To this day.
And at the same time, like, you're injured.
Yeah.
And in debt.
Yep.
Holy smokes. How did you dig yourself out of that? Yeah.
It took me years.
Really?
Like, it literally took me years. Yeah. And I made so many mistakes in that moment. Because then here's the deal. What I'm bypassing is I got another TV show.
Okay.
And I was making Monopoly money again. And then all of a sudden I was like, screw you, Broadway, screw you, show. Although I'm watching the Macy's Day Parade, and the dude, who at the time, by the way, he's absolutely brilliant. won the Tony. I just want to say this up front, and 100% deserved it, and was better suited to do the role than me. And by the way, I got to see him perform on Broadway.
Wow.
We met face to face. We had a one-on-one encounter. I was saved by then. And I'm kind of flash forwarding for a second because this is a real God moment. I was saved by then. And one of the dudes, the original guys that we're still friends with, who was a believer, he said, hey man, the guys and I, we want to invite you to see the show today. I was in New York for another TV show. And I looked at them and I was like, guys, I don't know if I can handle it. And they were like, okay, man. But we got you VIP seats and we just wanted to invite you. So I go back to my hotel room. I'm newly saved. And I do the only thing that I know how to do. I get down on my knees at the hotel bed. And I say to the Lord, you got to help me out here. I don't know what to do. And he said to me, man, I remember this so clearly. He says to me, if you will humble yourself and go, I have such healing for you.
Wow.
I didn't know what he meant. So I go. Now check this out. Talk about humility. I now lost my VIP seat because I waited to the last second. So now I have to go. I know. Thank you, Lord. He did warn me. It was gonna be humility. I now have to stand by the sound booth.
No way.
Next to the same woman who mixed my voice on Broadway. So I get like the worst, cheapest seat in the house, the free one by the sound booth. And I watch another guy do the role. Now, here's what I can describe. At that point, I'm the only other human being on planet Earth that knows what he is feeling like on the inside doing these things. And then afterwards, I get a text from Christian, who won the Tony as well, another actor in the piece, believer buddy of mine. And he says, hey bro, there's a bunch of people back here who want to say hi. So now I go, okay, Lord, is this? And he says, go. So I go. I say hi to people. There's lots of like looks and things, and there's dynamics, and they're all looking at me with pity, and I'm trying not to feel shame. But like, I get it. I understand why you're looking at me with pity, because you guys are in a hit show and I'm not. And then down the steps, I'll never forget this, walks John Lloyd Young, the gentleman who won the Tony for the play, who played the same role I did. And we look at each other, and the only equivalent is if you've ever watched Back to the Future, it's where Marty McFly sees himself. Yeah. Right?
Yes.
It's this moment where, and everybody is watching us, and the two Frankies are face to face in the flesh. And the Lord gave me the words. I said to him, because I knew immediately I had to say these words, and I felt it. I said, hey, you deserve the Tony. You did something I could not have accomplished.
Wow.
And you deserve all of the praise. And then he was quiet for a moment. He says, thank you. And he says, I just want you to know I had big shoes to fill.
Wow.
And man, I went back to my hotel room that night and I just wept. It was like I felt such deep healing because I had so much shame, so much pain, so much trauma. I mean, Frankie Valli sings a song, Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. This is how the Lord has used this to continue to speak to me about things that he wants to speak to me about. I kid you not. On the day that the show closed on Broadway, the three guys that I did the show with text me and say, we're in town. We want to have breakfast with you. So on the day that the show closes on Broadway, New York, I'm in Redding, California with the three dudes because they're touring on another show.
Wow.
We have breakfast. I mean, like if I wrote this, it would be like a Pure Flix or Hallmark film.
Yeah,
you're like, come
reals.
on, give me a break, bro. Like on the same day. I go to a bar with my buddies. We go to Woody's to have a beer that night. And as I'm sharing the redemption from that moment, guess what song plays in the bar? Can't Take My Eyes Off of You.
Bro.
And my buddy, he looks at me and I just stop cold. And he says to me, hey, bro, have you ever given thought to the fact that those lyrics are actually the Lord singing to you right now?
Wow.
Can't take my eyes off of you. You're just too good to be true. And the Lord has just used that whole story, that whole narrative to talk to me about how intimately he knows the inside of me, man.
Man, that's wild. It's crazy. Like there's always this gift inside of the deepest, darkest, hardest places of our life. And those are the places that we want to run from, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But man, if we learn how, and I did this a lot in my divorce, that actually this whole concept of your pain being a gift was something that really helped me transition through my divorce, because man, when you're in pain, all you want to do is run, right?
Guys do a lot of other things. Not only do we run, but we make more messes.
Yeah. Any way to get out of it, whatever running looks like.
Yeah.
But I realized, like, if I could press into the pain and I could process the pain with, like, I could literally sit down, which sometimes was ugly, right? Like sometimes I was angry, sometimes doing all that stuff, but past all the anger, past my judgment, past my whatever shame, was this really beautiful time where I got to ask God some questions.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do about this? How are you going to meet me here? And every time, like, he would meet me in that moment. And man, it's so cool to like watch you go through that experience, have this crazy low, and then God bring you all the way full circle back and give you that gift.
God is such a beautiful author. You know, we talk about him as the author and finisher of our faith, but because one of the things that I teach is writing, I can't help but look at our Father as a storyteller. So here's the deal, because this could get lost in translation, because I've told the story in pieces over the course of this episode. When my father, at 4 years old, steps off the plane from Cuba, Frankie Valli's song, Sherry, was playing at the airport.
Wow.
One of the last moments and chapters of this journey of mine is sitting at a bar on the day that the show has closed, having seen the guys that I played the story with, now sitting with my friends, and on the speakers at the bar, the Lord plays the song, Can't Take My Eyes Off of You. Like, if I wrote that in a script, you'd call me for cheese all day
100%.
long. But that's how intimate and specifically our Abba, our daddy, knows us. He knows how to get my attention. He knows what's gonna get on the inside of me, because he knows my love language.
Yeah.
He knows what I respond to and I listen to, man. And so for me, when I think about that whole journey, it was painful. It was, you know, the phrase that it just came to me, brother, as you just talked about pain, is like, I'm trying to start to look at pain as a highlighter. Like, what if when I'm in pain, the Lord is just highlighting a moment going, hey, I just need you. Let's just pay attention to this right now. Just you and me. Let's just take another look at this. And you're 100% right. I've run from pain most of my life. If I'm honest, it's only within the last 5 to 10 years that I've even considered it. Yeah. And most intensely in the last few years. Yeah. That pain is a gift.
It is a gift. And it's an easy thing to do is to run from it. I want to just transition just a tiny bit. Like, you came to school ministry at Bethel Church. Like you said, it was kind of your midlife crisis coming, and which is a big change, right? To go from LA to Bethel to be a student.
From like 3 million to 100,000. Yeah.
Bro, that's crazy. And became a student. Yeah. You did what, 2 years there?
Just one.
1 year there.
I got recruited out of first year by Danny Silk.
Bro, that's awesome. Yeah. And then how did you, like, take us through the process just real quick about founding the conservatory?
Yeah, man. I came up from my midlife crisis because I heard the song by Kim Walker, the Jesus Culture song, and a Danny Silk book, Culture of Honor. Yeah. And it was that sloppy wet kiss that I was like, where is this place, man? This Holy Spirit Disneyland, like what is this, right? And in those moments of worship at the Civic with 1,200 hungry souls, man, those were my first encounters with Holy Spirit, if I'm honest, right? That I really recognize, that I fully recognize. So I became senior producer at Bethel Media, and then did some work for Bethel Music. And then it was around that time that Fab and my wife, Lisa Noroña, and Claire Altamora, these two families, had started to share years before what the Lord had spoken to both families before we ever met. Like almost exact phrases about this safe place to take risks, a spirit-filled Conservatory or Spirit-filled Juilliard being, maybe one of the top 1 or 2 drama schools in the world. And it was actually sitting with your dad at a book promo meeting for one of his books. And he got his last meeting canceled. And man, your dad is such a hero to me. And I was like 2 years in the environment. And I felt like I was sitting with like the James Brown of like rock and roll. Like, I mean, your dad was always, always traveling and so busy. And I felt like I got your dad all to myself.
Yeah.
And just selfishly, I was just like, oh, I got KV to myself, man. This is my moment. And, we were talking, and his last meeting got canceled. And then your dad was so sweet. He just put his feet up on his desk or something. And he's like, I think he started talking to me about, have you ever been on NCIS? And I was like, no, Chris, no, I've never been on that one, man, but I've been on this one. And then he asked me this really fateful question. He said, because BSSM, the School of Supernatural Ministry, had these electives started by Teresa Denman, who's really like the creative foremother of...
Yeah, she pioneered a lot of it.
She did, man. She broke it open. Like she chopped through the wilderness with a machete and broke open the way for everybody that followed. And so there were these creative expressions in BSSM, and your dad asked a really sweet question. He said to me, hey, tell me, what business does a school of ministry have in creativity and the arts? And here's the deal. I've been thinking about that one a lot.
I bet you had.
I had. And specifically over the first year of BSSM. And I said, Chris, I'm so glad you asked me that. And in kind of like baby acorn form, I shared this little baby version of this thing that would ultimately become the Conservatory of the Arts. And your dad, from the get-go, was the biggest champion. He sewed in money from BSSM to help start BCA.
Wow.
He actually charged us that we were waiting too long to do it. He said, no, don't wait till then. Let's start this now. Your dad has been BCA's biggest champion from the beginning.
It's so cool because, I mean, you guys really are pioneering just the kingdom in the arts. And so I talk about this a lot, but it feels like in the Christian world, we're so catching up because for so long, like our theology around God coming back, the
end times,
the
rapture,
end times, the rapture, all that stuff was, hey, we're just gonna survive. We're gonna get people saved, but we're not gonna be, we're not gonna be professionals.
Forget about movie night.
Yeah,
there's no time for movie night.
Golly. And out of that, right, we're behind in music, we're behind in any arts almost, and in technology and stuff. And so, man, Christian music growing up, so cheesy. Christian movies, so cheesy, bro.
Still rough.
Yeah.
Here's where I get hope. So I remember, because this was another thing that kind of like broke it open for me. I was a first year, I think, and I admire so much Jeremy Riddle and Steph Gretzinger, and Bethel Music ministers to me so much. And they were on the label at the time. And I remember that I was watching them, I think, prepare for Sunday worship. And often Steph and Jeremy, like dynamic duo, they would lead worship together. And I remember I was at the back just trying to be quiet and stuff, and I was hearing him just, and Jeremy, like at 9 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. And this is a thought that I had. I was like, first of all, two thoughts. First of all, I was like, damn, that guy, he's so freaking good looking. He's like, good, man, he like freaking looks like Bono.
It's so
and he looks, he sings like Bono, and he looks like Jesus. Like, that's so unfair, Lord. And then I was watching them lead, and it was so raw, but the quality level was so fantastic. I was like, I honestly had the thought, we are so spoiled here at Bethel because we like get to worship to Coldplay.
It's true.
Every Sunday, right? Production value. But here's what I heard the Lord say. I said, because here's the question that I asked just on that thing that you said. I said, Lord, why is that so good and the rest of the arts so piss poor? And he said to me, it's because they know they have a home.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, wait, what does that mean? And he says, later on, he said to me, who's going to welcome the creative prodigal sons and daughters home? The misfits, the ones who have been rejected by the world because they believe in me, and by the church because they're artists.
Wow.
Man, I can feel Holy Spirit right now. And it was that question that the Lord asked me that was kind of the charge to say, well, what are we going to do about the quality? What are we going to do about it? Because it's a long game, bro. I mean, I joke that at BCA, man, we're not turning out Hondas. We are hand sewing the seats on frickin' Lamborghinis because we're talking about class sizes of 10, 15 students, sometimes 5 students.
Yeah.
People will say after a year to 3 years of BCA that the measure of transformation and healing is absolutely exponential, because kind of going back to my original exercise of looking at pictures of my ex-girlfriend and bawling my head out. But imagine if I had done that exercise in the presence of Holy Spirit.
Right.
Imagine if I had done it under the guidance of good fathers and mothers.
Right.
Well, bro, then all bets are off.
Oh, it's crazy. I love it too, because there's I want to ask you about this, but there's a whole narrative about manhood and masculinity inside of the industry that's real. And I don't know what it was like for you being a man in the industry. I'd love to know, but I just feel like we have part of our role is to bring identity into the world, really, as a man, right? Is to give that identity. And man, without fathers leading, without fathers and mothers, healthy fathers and mothers, I mean, the industry paints a man as either weak or that was a lot of sitcoms. Yep. When I grew up,
the stupid dad.
Yeah. Who just is dumb and can't get anything right.
Checked out.
Or the opposite, right? Like nowadays, a lot of it's going the homosexual, LGBTQ, and that's a lot of the narrative. But man, coming in and actually reframing what it really means to be a man and giving a guy a place too. So I think a lot, even in me, like I had a guy ask me a couple of weeks ago, "Hey, can we bring in some dancers into some of the men's stuff that we're doing at the church?" And my first reaction was like, "Oh, I don't want guy dancers."
And you don't want girl dancers either.
I don't want girl dancers.
That's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And I messaged Fob and I said like, "Hey, can you help me with this?"
Right.
Because culture, right? Culture has taken men who dance.
Yeah.
Right. Culture has something to say about that they're more effeminate. Totally. They're more in that, like, you're having to go back to like, well, David danced.
He did.
There's a lot of Jesus was he's a dancing man. I mean, God is God created that stuff, but culture has a narrative on manhood and masculinity. Like, we won't take a super long time on this, man. But what was it like just a little bit for you being in the industry? And then can you just speak into kind of what you guys do at BCA as far as that piece?
Such a good question, man. I mean, here's the deal. Like, I think that the conversation actually has to start early on. I mean, I'm raising 3 boys and we're navigating all kinds of things specifically around sexuality and social media and all of these influences. Like, this generation has to deal with things that I never had to deal with, right? I had to deal with my dad's playboys, you know? All of those things came up for me. All of them, sexuality, attractions, confusions, all kinds of things. I shared with you off mic, but I wanted to share with you on mic, like when the whole Me Too thing was happening, which I actually think was on the father's heart. I mean, there's a lot of layers to it. And so I don't want to go there, but like, here's what I'll say. Like, I know for a fact that a lot of my female counterparts were abused, taken advantage of, put in completely rough situations. And I mean, for a long, long time, God's daughters were treated like prostitutes in the industry. So my view when that came up briefly on it was actually, it was the justice heart of God reckoning the actual legitimately dark side of completely unconsecrated, messed up, broken masculinity. So I'm not trying to justify that. 100%. I'm also not trying to demonize men.
Yep.
For me, the way I experienced it, and this is something I haven't often talked about, but I shared with you off mic and I want to share now, is like, I actually also had to deal with that myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had, on both sides of the aisle, female counterparts and people in positions of authority approach me. I've had male approach me in super inappropriate ways. I've had directors ask me up to their room.
Yep.
I've had directors find my number and then call me. So like, no, I don't want to pretend that I was ever put in positions like some of our some of the female actresses, but I mean enough that I was like, oh wow. So I mean, what we do with BCA, whether it's that you have a kissing scene, whether it's that you're married, whether it's that maybe you've struggled with your sexuality. Because I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
For a lot of artists, what happens to artists is that same thing that allows us to be creative, which allows us to juggle lots of different perspectives on things. I mean, when you play a character who's evil, you actually have to a certain extent.
You got to channel some of that.
You have to inhabit and understand and not judge the evil. You also have to step out and judge evil because evil's evil. But sometimes we have to do and say things that are not representative of our moral code. Listen, I mean, you can't read the Bible and not see some baddies, some bad guys in the Bible, right? Well, if you go to shoot that as a movie, somebody has to play that bad guy, right? So like somebody has to play Bathsheba, somebody has to play David in the shower scene. Like those things happen. Like, I don't think God's afraid of those things. What we try to train the artist to do is, and this goes back to like root questions. Number one, I think if you're a parent and you're raising a creative, you're gonna have to get used to your creative kids looking at situations, at art, at creativity. They're mentally very flexible. Artists are used to doing mental gymnastics. So the tension is going to be when it comes to root things like identity in Christ, your sexual identity. We're going to have to help our kids understand kind of what's negotiable, what's not negotiable, and also give them language for. The other thing that I didn't get permission for, like I grew up in a Cuban home where if you cross your legs the way that I'm crossing them right now and you wore pointy shoes, I won't use the word, but you were gay.
Yeah.
That's how my grandfather saw it. Today, if I'm in Budapest or, like I was shooting a show, like my wife knows because this is me. I love art. I love art. I go to see ballet.
Yeah.
I go to see opera. Now, in certain circles, I would be judged on my sexuality for that, but I know who I sleep with at night. I think if we could broaden the language of masculinity, not on the core things, but on how different men enjoy life, the world, music, art, creativity. Because here's the thing, man, when we tell a little boy that wanting to be an operatic tenor or a ballet dancer is wrong or bad, I will tell you how that will play out. Yeah. And it doesn't play out the way that the church, quote unquote, wants it to.
It doesn't, man. And it's so hard and confusing. I've told this a lot because, my story or whatever, but all of my sexual experiences up until 16-year-old were with guys, all of them, from oral sex with a guy friend of mine at whatever, 10 or 11 to, masturbating together, watching pornography, or all of them were. And I don't know if I'm super creative or not super creative. I was just really curious.
That's another word for creativity though.
Yeah. Super curious. And the difference to me is I had a dad that I would tell stuff to.
Yeah.
So I'd come home and my dad knew that, gosh, I remember the first time my dad asked me like, hey, let's talk about masturbation. He started explaining, I almost fell out of the car. Bro, I started sweating.
You were probably like, he knows about this?
Dude, I wanted to leave the car so bad. And every time I'd get into the car, it's real. Like every time I'd get into the car, I knew my dad was going to talk about girls or masturbation.
I mean, the same look. I'm like, God, as soon as they take the breath, you go, oh, here it comes. We're going to have the talk.
But he removed so much of the shame and allowed me a place to talk. I never one time that I can remember got stuck in, is something wrong with me? Now, my dad remembers times when I came to him after oral sex and said like, I think I'm like, I don't know if I'm gay or not. He remembers that conversation. Right. I don't remember it. All I remember him saying was, hey, you're just really curious. I took his, you're just really curious as gospel.
Of course.
Went on, did the rest of my life, never thought about it again. It wasn't until I was 16 years old, got my first real girlfriend, right? Making out with her, doing stuff I'm not supposed to do, that I realized that I was like, wow, that was my first sexual experience with a woman. Real sexual experience with
firsts. I mean, we study this when you're studying the Bible. Firsts are super important. Firsts imprint you. Firsts are, my first sexual experiences were, with my cousin.
Yeah, exactly.
And those things can be very, very formative. And, I know we're not having this conversation today, but, I think if we could just have the conversations around it. I think the scariest part of what's currently happening in culture is it feels like you will get eviscerated by just wanting to talk.
100%.
And yet there's a lot of stuff we're not talking about that I feel is super dishonest.
100%. Here's the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, we have to have these conversations because there's so much confusion around manhood, masculinity. If a guy wants to go and, learn how to act, and that world is so full. And at the same time, like we don't have the luxury anymore of not having the conversation with our kids and creating healthy identity. Man, I just love what you guys are doing. I'm so thankful that you have paved the way for so many men and women to be able to not feel shame because they want to work in an industry where they're acting, and not feel shame because whatever they want to step out and experience, that type of creativity. It's phenomenal. And what you and Fab and your wives have built together is just, it's really, really cool.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Any last thoughts for guys and that you would have?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe because I'm in the throes of raising, I've got from a 19-year-old to a 7-year-old, it's like, and because when you start to raise teenagers, everything that people try to warn you about some of the challenges that come up when you're raising kids that you thought somehow you're like, yeah, but not me,
not
Lord.
Me.
I think the biggest lie that I believed was, but not me.
Yeah.
I think I've had to navigate over the last few years that you can be the dude who does the father-son camps. You can be the guy who served at church and was a kids pastor. You can be the guy that, has been faithful or not faithful to your wife. Like, I don't know how to articulate this thing of just like, just because you love Jesus does not mean that you're not going to be faced with some really crazy, challenging conversations with your children.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, without getting into too much of it, that I think what the Lord has revealed to me is that He is so for you, even in your darkest moments. I've had to navigate some of the deepest, darkest pain of my life over the last 2 years. And every time I've just gone into that quiet, secret devotional space with the Father, He's always spoken to me. He has answered prayers for me in the last few months. When things got the darkest, He has answered prayers that I literally can only tell you are the fact that He heard my voice in those 5 a.m. prayers, and that He came through in a way that I could not even fathom. So, I mean, I guess if you've got kids and you're navigating any of these topics, all of it, whether it's heterosexual sexuality or whatever else, it's like, get in there, talk. You need some good brothers. I mean, Jay, you've helped me and my family out at least on one or more occasions. And so like, you got to find some really good people, because I think, Jay, your life story, if it's taught me anything, man, it's like the worst thing we can do is not talk about it.
Yeah, it's true. And man, I second what you just said. Like the thing about like raising kids and life is that my wife said this the other day. She said, I thought doing one hard thing would exempt you from other hard things, but it doesn't, right? The only guarantee that we have in this life is that there's going to be more challenging things ahead. And we see that in heaven, right? You have a perfect government. It's a perfect environment, a perfect culture. And a third of the angels go, I don't really want this. And we see that with the disciples. And I'm so glad that one of the disciples went like, nah, I'm going to do my own thing. 2 of the disciples. And I'm so glad that Peter did his thing and Judas did his thing. Otherwise we would think like, man, I just haven't got it right. I haven't done the perfect thing. But the awesome thing about being a dad, and I experienced this with my kids, with my oldest kids, is, they went through so much pain because of my divorce. And that was on me. And I can't say, well, I caused all of it, but it was my decision to have kids. It wasn't their decision. It was my decision to get married. It wasn't their decision.
That's right.
And so it's my responsibility. And man, I felt so powerless with my kids have inherited this big mess. They've inherited all this pain that they should never had to go through, and therefore caused so much of the, challenges that they faced in high school and stuff. And I just remember just being so heartbroken and feeling really powerless about it. But My oldest son had a really hard time from freshman year to senior year of high school. I remember reaching out to Danny, and Danny was like, the most important thing is your connection. You can't change him, right? But you can stay connected.
Right.
And I did that. And it wasn't until he was 4 years later till he had an encounter with God where his life radically transformed. And I remember the same thing with my daughter. She was just in so much pain at like 10 years old, and she would run away for a couple hours and come back. And I just remember just like crying to God, literally crying to God, saying like, you owe me, right? Which is a bad thing to say to God. But I had felt like I had helped so many kids in my, in counseling, and just helped so many families. I was like, God, you owe me. Like I just felt so powerless, but like I need help for my daughter. And he gave us, like he literally gifted us this woman named Cheryl. And Cheryl was a child play therapist.
Wow.
Which I thought was phony at first, but I was so desperate. I sent my daughter to her.
Wow.
And like, I feel so grateful. She completely transformed my daughter's life.
Wow.
And to this day, my daughter still is connected with her and connected with another person in her life that when she needs help, she goes to her. When she wants to work something out, she goes. Like, I have watched God come through over and over and over again in my mistakes.
Yep.
And the things that I would go back and say, I regret that God's been faithful to walk my kids through that.
I was washing dishes. I was looking out the window, and all of a sudden, when you get these waves of pain, I was just mourning the situation with one of my children. And I was looking out the window. I was washing the dishes, trying to be a good husband. And I said, Lord, but why one of my kids, Lord?
Yeah.
Like, why me? Why would you allow this? All the basic questions. And I heard the Lord say something so simple. He just said, when I said something about my son, the phrase, my son, and he was quiet. And then he said to me, I know. And in that moment, I realized, and we talk about it, we preach, we sing about it, but I literally heard like a dad, like I was sitting with a dad, and I was here complaining about a tough situation, but certainly not the death of my son.
Yeah.
And the father that I was sitting with, this other dad, who, yes, happens to be my heavenly dad, he's hearing me play the violin over this situation.
Yeah.
But see, my son is still alive. And then the other father just says, I know. And in that moment, I realized that I was talking to a father whose son had been crucified. And here's the thing, our father is so loving that there wasn't 1 ounce of condemnation.
Yeah.
There was such compassion. It wasn't an I know of like, yeah, tell me about it, buddy.
Yeah.
No, it was like, I understand.
I'm with you.
And dude, that wrecked me, man.
Bro. Listen, on that note, would you pray for us?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Abba, we love you so much. And you're such a good Papa. You're such a good dad. And Lord, I know that you have a whole, like thousands of sons who also happen to be fathers and husbands out there, but they're first and foremost your boys, your sons listening to this podcast right now. And Father, I just pray that they would know that you design them, that you know their love language, that there's no part of themselves that they need to be afraid of, and that they would have the bravery and the courage, Lord, and the humility to just bring those quote unquote dirty, broken, messy, beautiful parts to you. And guys, just know that the Lord so knows that love language. He'll know exactly what to say to you. In Jesus' name.
Amen. David, I appreciate you, man, so much.
Oh, man.
And your life and
bro.
your story and your insights are just so inspirational, man.
Thank you for what you do, man. Your voice, your story, the way that you talk to men has personally impacted my life and my family, man. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, man. BraveCo, man, hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Have an incredible week. Stay brave out there. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.